Now and then one must go into solitude and practice spiritual discipline to realize God. Living in the world and entangled in many of its duties, the aspirant, during the first stage of spiritual life, finds many obstacles in the path of concentration. While the trees on the footpath are young, they must be fenced around, otherwise they will be destroyed by the cattle. The fence is necessary when the tree is young, but it can be taken away when the trunk is thick and strong. And then the tree won't be hurt, even if an elephant is tied to it. It is extremely difficult to teach others. A man can teach only if God reveals himself to him and gives the command. Narada, Sukadevi, and sages like them had such a command from God, and Shankara had it too. Unless you have a command from God, who will listen?
Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagna Sadrisham Tattvama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamatchalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavati Tam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, virtue and vice, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Yam Brahma Varnendra Rudra Marutaha Shnunvanti Davoy Vedai Sangha Pada Krama Upanishadoi Gayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavashtita Tadgatena Manasha Pashantiyam Yogino Yashantam Naviduhu Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Our eternal salutations to that one who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the saints and seers call by various names. Our eternal salutations to that one whose glories are sung in the various scriptures of the different religious traditions of the world, but whose infinite and undying grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our eternal salutations to that one upon whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts, realizing an ineffable presence in their deepest contemplation. May he prompt our minds toward the path of truth and righteousness. May she reveal herself into our souls and dispel the gloom of death, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome today, Sunday, to our final class of this particular series in Portland, Oregon, where we are coming to you live in live streaming to our audience who is mounting and joining us for these weekend occasions, whether they be held in San Francisco at the SRV Association there, or here in Portland, Oregon, or in Hawaii. All three of those SRV centers are live streaming every weekend as far as possible at about the same time of day, although of course because of the time zones change you're going to have to look at that change in your particular area. But what's always being transmitted to you is this essence of life and existence, as we just chanted. The Vedanta has a particular penchant for bringing that out, bringing the non-dual out of the dual, or bringing out the hidden changing reality out of the unchanging reality, out of changing Maya, or changing samsara. Buddhism, Vedanta, other various religions of the world use different words for it. Something that pulls a wool over the collective eyes of humanity and causes it to think in terms, as Sri Ramakrishna was just saying in the gospel that we were reading before we started the class, think in terms of sin instead of eternal perfection. So Vedanta really focuses more on the flowers and gives up watering the weeds. Pratipaksha bhavanam, it's called, a nice long Sanskrit word. You may hear nice long Sanskrit words a lot at SRV, because as he was just saying as well, if you start studying Sanskrit, then all of a sudden you start rattling off Sanskrit slokas. And that's something called svadhyaya in our tradition, or called study of scriptures, memorization of slokas. It's both in the Yoga Sutras recommended, and it's also recommended in the Vedanta, in the Four Jewels and Six Treasures, and in Buddhism, in the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. All these various systems, numbered in different ways, giving to us so that we can account for this missing element in our life, this one principle that's unchanging amidst changing things. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam. It's the eternal among non-eternal things, and it's the intelligence of the most intelligent ones. And those most intelligent ones are called seers, saints, saviors, sages. Even the savant, if you want to add another S word in there, is looking for that truth. And many of our American savants in our early history retired into the woods to cabins like the yogis of India did in the early times, to be alone and to look deep within, to render the mind calm and equanimous, and to shut down the senses, for at least for a time, to remove the senses from the objects, and to get control of the life force which is pulsing just below the surface of everything. We see the life force, as we studied yesterday, in 5 forms. Our breath enacts every few moments the two or three of those forms, an upmoving force, a downmoving force, and a sustaining force, the Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka of pranayama that is taught in various systems. And then there's always this all-pervasive force too, that's circulating force too. So there are 5 different forms of one prana, and we looked at it yesterday in terms of more than just the body's health, but how these same movements of prana take souls from this world to the next, or take souls tonight from the waking state to the dreaming state and into the deep sleep state, and take the mind souls of beings who are qualified for samadhi, nirvana, satori, and beatific vision to the highest state of samadhi too, all riding on this great Garuda bird called prana. So to get a hold of the prana is one of the main things that the yogi desires. But if you are from a culture that doesn't know about prana, like the fishermen didn't know when Christ came among them, he had to tell them, man does not live by bread alone. Don't you know there's another energy coursing below the surface through which you truly live, and through which you die, and through which you're born again. So those slokas we've been taking up in the Svetashvatara Upanishad, chapter 5, some 12 or 13 slokas in that chapter, and we will finish them today and go on to chapter 6 in my May visit. So those of you who are following the text closely and are studying ahead of time for my visits, which is a good thing to do, you may look at chapter 6, the final chapter of Svetashvatara Upanishad, and we'll go on to another Upanishad later after we finish that. And those in San Francisco and Hawaii still catching up with us. Portland is coursing ahead because we have 4 classes over 2 weekends, plus a retreat in Portland quite often, so we get to intensify here in the Northwest quite a bit. And rain and snow and weather conditions don't keep us from that. We continue to meet as a sangha, a group of beings who are interested in sat, truth, sat sangha. So in that regard, we are looking into the Svetashvatara Upanishad. Svetashvatara was a great rishi, one of the more recent of the ancient rishis. His Upanishad appeals to us very much because it's a mixture of the highest truth with poetry, and it's said in a poetic way, and also contains nuggets of qualified non-dual truth, and also healthy dualism. When you become a non-dualist, it doesn't mean, in Swami Vivekananda's way of thinking, that you X out of the equation Vishishta Dvaita or Dvaita, that is qualified non-dualism or dualism, which means dualism is pray to your Father in heaven, and qualified non-dualism would be I'm the vine and you're the branches. So whether you see God and mankind, creature and creator, nature and spirit as 2 separate things, or whether you see that there's a connection between nature, yourself, the soul, and God. Those are 4 ways we looked at perceiving God yesterday, if you remember, in those charts. The 4 ways in which yoga, Vedanta, and Bhagavad Gita and other ways of clear seeing, darshanas, look at perceiving reality. Or whether you see and are interested in that strictly non-dual path, say like the Advaita Vedantists or the Zen Buddhists or the Muslims and so forth. I and my Father are one would always be your mantra in that case. But whatever the case may be, Svetashvatara opens the road for all 3 of those avenues, as if one needs to be able to go up and down them at will. If you want to talk to a dualist and you want to come down to the level of dualism and be able to speak in terms of the richness of God and his lila, as we were talking about yesterday, that divine sport which God plays through the marvelous human vehicle, as Sri Ramakrishna puts it, called lila. But he didn't say anything about playing in the Maya. So when you go outside, hopefully, on the playground, you'll stay away from lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, fear, remorse, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage. The 6 passions and the 8 fetters are called in our tradition. And you'll also stay away from avidya, ignorance of your true nature, and asmita, too much egotism, and ragadvesha, attachment and aversion, and abhinivesha, clinging to life, or fear of death, as the case may be. Those are the things which are kleshas or obstacles in the way of yoga. Yoga is moksha, is mukti, is a matter already at hand as far as the non-dualists are concerned. For others, they're striving for it. But the non-dualist says, I am that, tatomasi, or aham brahmasmi, or I am my Father one, and tries to live in that mental asana, as we looked at last weekend, that new chart that I put on the board about how to keep a mental asana and how to keep away from too many physical asanas, because that's become the obsession with American culture now. Hatha yoga is bad. Raja yoga is good. Who said that? Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in that book you were reading. So Hatha yoga attaches you to occult powers. We were talking about those yesterday. Domination over others, trying to break the laws of gravity by levitating, so forth and so on. You only get sore haunches by trying that. You see, leaping in the air cross-legged. You just need one posture, and that's to make everything still and quiet so that you can get into yoga. So climbing the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga means that you're going to have to be very careful of these kleshas, or Buddhism calls it kilesha in Pali. And these obstacles are called viparyayas, antaryayas, forbidding words in Sanskrit that warn you away from these traps that so many of the young, potentially budding aspirants in the West have fallen into. The main one being pratyahara, as we were talking about yesterday, how to keep the mind free of objects. The mind wants to take objects, like fire wants to take on the shape of that which it's burning. So that's the natural thing, really. It's natural if you can attach and detach at will. But if you associate with an object and then become obsessed with it, become attached to it in any way, and it impedes your freedom, then you're out of yoga. You have fallen out of balance. So you must always, as they say, give that gut check. That spiritual discipline, sadhana, will always keep you free and clear of such impediments, so that you can always be moving forward and flowing, like this prana that's flowing through you. And whether you flow from waking to dreaming to deep sleep tonight, or whether you flow from one breath to the next, or whether you flow from one experience, or the day's experience to tomorrow's experiences, or whether you flow from birth into life and then back into death and back into rebirth, at some point the soul's going to say, I don't flow anymore. Flowing has to do with the prana and the flow of thoughts from one place to another, but there is only one place in me, and that's Brahman. And that's stable, quiet, peaceful, blissful, all-pervasive, unchanging. It's moksha, it's mukti, it's kaivalya, it's samadhi, it's nirvana. So that's always been and always will be the goal of authentic spiritual life, is to attain that. And if you can attain it while you're in the body, you can do it anywhere. You can do it in heaven, you can do it in sleep, you can do it in the realms of the ancestors even, which hopefully you'll develop enough capacity to transcend someday. So if that's the case, then beings like Svetashvatara, this great rishi, are spot on for letting us know about how to transcend. And he says, for instance, in this set of slokas we're studying right now, that individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. It is potentially infinite. It has to be known. Whether it is neither female nor male nor neuter, whatever body it assumes, it becomes identified with that. By desire, contact, sight, and delusion, the embodied soul assumes successfully various forms in various places according to its deeds, just as the body grows and gets nourished by showers of food and drink. The embodied soul chooses many forms, gross and subtle, based on the qualities belonging to itself, that is, karmas and gunas. to the actions and to its mind, the cause of their combination is found to be still in another place. So, of course, the causeless cause would be Brahman. You can't assign any work to it. You can't assign any senses to it. You can't assign the thinking process to it. You can't assign energy or prana to it. You can't assign name and form to it. You can't assign time and space to it because it's free of all those things, which you find out when you go into samadhi. You find it out for yourself. And if you don't, then you have to take the words of the saints and seers when they come back and tell you, hear ye, O immortals on earth, I have seen the Great One. So those great dictums in the Upanishads are called Vedanta Dindima, see the final statements, the Mahavakyas, the great sayings, or coming from the Vakdevi, the goddess of the word, or from the word itself, Om. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, are three different stages of the Word. So you study those in your mind and you put them together with everything that comes after and everything that was before, to find out that beginnings, middles, and ends are all nonsense, that coming and going is all apparent only, it's non-actual, and that you're stable, always and ever, that you watched and witnessed all your births, lives, and deaths in time. You can go on denying the existence of this and that, but you can never deny the existence of the one who's doing the denying, as my teacher used to tell us. There is that witness looking on at all times, in all places. And so that's why he says their cause of mind, action, and so forth, is found to be still another. Sometimes they refer to Brahman as completely other than anything in the realm of action, energy, thought, mind, intelligence, ego, any of those areas. Or if you want to put it in terms of akasha, that nice Sanskrit word which means space, completely other and than physical, energetical, mental, intellectual, or individual, or collective, or even cosmic. That's why we started off this chapter by looking at that beautiful chart here of the cosmic consciousness, with Lord Brahma presiding over everything, and Vishnu sustaining everything, and Lord Shiva coming along finally and dissolving it again. That is rising of the wave, or thousands or millions of waves on the ocean of consciousness, its play, their play, and then their dissolution back into the ocean, all without anything happening. And every once in a while a huge tidal wave will roll over that ocean and gather up all the smaller waves into it. So that's this great cosmic being called the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and so forth. That's why we sing such beautiful songs to that reality. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Eva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And then at the end of that, what I just chanted before class, Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagna Sadrisham Tattvamashadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamatchalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam. Sakshibhutam means the witness of all phenomena. So they're talking about you, not the individual soul, but the indivisible soul. So you take your mind off of the former and you place it on the latter, and you realize your true nature. So in order to do that, the West is going to, as Dalai Lama has told us again and again, have to look into this principle of reincarnation and karma. So these slokas that we're reading here are really talking about cause. See, cause and effect. Anything that has a cause. Just as the sun shines, lighting all of space, above, below, and across, even so does that one adorable reality, the repository of all goodness and greatness, preside over everything that has the nature of a cause. So everything that has the nature of a cause has to be from Lord Brahma all the way down to air, earth, fire, water, and ether, which was caused by your senses, because you connect earth to smell, and water to taste, and fire to sight, and feeling, touch to air, and ether to hearing, right? So all of those are connected in you. Everything is one, not just Brahman. It just seems to be two or many. So that seeming appearance of things is what the great seeker of truth, the aspirant, the acolyte, the sadhaka, wants to see through and get to that core so they can live in a non-dual state of mind ever and always, and never deviate from that. That's why the Zen Buddhist walked up to the hot dog vendor and said, "Make me one with everything." He's European, so he hasn't heard that joke yet. So I'm safe in saying it. Everyone else just, Well, actually the Zen Buddhist wasn't quite mature yet, was he? Because he said, "Make me one with everything." But if he had been a mature Zen Buddhist who had had nirvana like Buddha did, he would have said, "I'm already one with everything. Now just let me consume it." And go easy on the mustard or something. Go easy on the shunyata, on the emptiness. See, go easy. Make sure I know that everything here in the realm of name and form is empty, like quantum physics is beginning to tell me, but hasn't made the right conclusion yet, that they should give it up and renounce it instead of play with it. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. It's an ancient rule set in stone in spiritual life. All the great souls, hands off, gave it all up. No agency, no ownership, no sense of separate self. A strange combination. First, you can't own anything, you shouldn't put your name on it. Second, you're not the agent of your actions, so you should start reducing the ego element in things. At the same time, you have to affirm that everything is one and you're one with everything. So it keeps you from that, taking that step in the wrong direction. You say, "I renounce everything, name and form and nature and so forth, but I renounce it out of aversion." So you've taken a step toward the immature side of things. You should be renouncing it out of practical insight, because it's empty. Consisting of particles shifting at a billionth of a second sounds like shifting sand to me. So where is the bedrock in all of this? It's that one immutable foundation or substratum that Lord Kapila talked about as the basis of the Purusha, as compared to Prakriti. See? Purusha and Prakriti have a relationship, but they don't mix, because they seem to mix like oil and water. For about 45 seconds that'll happen, you see. This is how we teach the children in Vedanta. You see, growing up, you say, "Do oil and water mix?" And they say, "Yes, Babaji, they mix nicely." But if you put it there for about 45 seconds, you'll see the separating process happen. And you see that spirit and soul, that spirit and matter don't mix at all. They just have a relationship temporarily. Now, if you know about this, and you are aware of that before you get into the body, like, say, the Tibetan Buddhists would want you to do. So you leave the body in a conscious state, come back as a bodhisattva, or get into the state of a jivan mukta, we say in Vedanta. Jiva, the embodied soul, mukta, free. Somebody who's free even if they're in the body. Then they begin to find out that they can separate the wheat from the chaff, as Jesus said, or the real from the unreal, as Vedanta says. Brahman satya jagad mithya. Mithya means false. If Brahman is real, all of this is false. Because I cannot rely on it, it changes. You might have noticed by now. The changing world. Unreliable, and also fraught with suffering. first of Buddhist noble truth. There is suffering. What part of that didn't you understand when you tried to build a utopian society? See? So renounce it, give it up, hands off, and then move amongst the objects. See? You can be in the world, but don't be of it, as they say. Sri Ramakrishna had so many stories about that. The duck rests in the water, but the water never gets into the duck. See? The turtle swims in the ocean, but its mind is always on its eggs, buried in the sand. The mudfish lives at the bottom of the ocean in the mud, but its scales still shine. On, he told stories about God and the world and how the two don't mix, but how the two can have a relationship, Purusha with Prakriti, soul with nature. But at some point the soul is going to want to get a divorce, see? And go to the high court of Advaita, you see, and say to the judge, Lord Brahma, take it back. Take back what you said. Take back what you projected. I don't want it anymore. I've been in the bath long enough. I got wrinkled. Old age, you see, has come again and again through my series of lifetimes. Enough of that. I want to be in my pure, stable nature again. So I've been saying that in terms of, we love the creation process, Brahma, and we love the sustainer, Vishnu, but have we met Shiva yet? Do we know Shiva inside of us, how to dissolve everything? Because we do it every night in deep sleep, then shouldn't we try and do that same thing in meditation so that we know what it's like to be free of name and form, time and space, lust, anger, greed, envy, shame, so forth and so on. See, those are not my true nature. Original sin is untenable and unacceptable. I believe in eternal perfection. And that perfection I will find. And Vedanta and rishis like Svetashvatara are helping us find that way, even though he spoke these things 5,000-10,000 years ago. Still, they echo down today to us in the same pure fashion that they were in the state that they were in then. So that's why in the process of embodiment, anything that has a cause is suspect. So we have to look for causes and effects, and then finally come to that place where we know that this embodied self chooses many forms, gross and subtle, based on its own karma. So karma and rebirth, as I was saying, good Dalai Lama has said we should look into those in the West. They'll solve all our problems. Our problems at the physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, psychological, and spiritual level. These antaryayas, these viparyayas, these kleshas, these obstacles in the way of natural abidance, sahaja samadhi, just living in a natural state of peace, bliss, love, and light, that we covet so much and we hear about so much, but then it's so difficult for us to try and live that way in an imperfect world. Well, that's why we chanted, may Brahman protect us, sustain us, and illumine our thinking process and free us from fault-finding. And fault-finding with what? With others, with the teachings, but also with the world. This world is imperfect by nature, then you can't find fault with something that's imperfect by nature. You can't fault the baby for being a baby, because it can't yet operate itself. So it grows up, you grow up, and you see the difference between soul and nature and how the separation process happens. There is a cause and effect from Brahma all the way down to the element earth, says Kapila of the Samkhya system. And there's a reverse chain of cause and effect from earth all the way back up to Brahma. That's that reverse cause and effect chain called involution that we don't know about. We think this is all there is. It's spilled out from somewhere, maybe a big bang. And so on the physical level alone, we're taking everything. The physical cause and effect is all we know, from food to sperm to ovum to fetus to body to brain to death. From the cradle to the grave, all we think about is the physical cause, not knowing that there are 5 or 6 other levels of cause and effect inside of us, back in the kingdoms of heaven, if you will. See? That there's a whole cause and effect that you're going to have to trace to the ancestors, so you can be free of returning. You can get out of heaven, earth, and hell This thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death, and death to birth the soul. Say peace to all, from me no danger be to aught that lives. From those who live on high, those who lowly creep, I am the self in all. All worlds, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes, all fears. Vivekananda couldn't have put it much clearer. He's like talk about the Four Noble Truths. He's come forward with the truth that's beyond practice, that's beyond evolution and involution, and stated it for you to ponder and to grow into, to realize as your true nature. Well, great souls like he and like the great mother that he worshipped, Sri Sharda Devi, when she was alive, my teacher's teacher, have talked about the rebirth process in such a way to illumine our thinking process, as we just chanted, and free us from fault finding. That is, we come to a degree of acceptance of the first noble truth, suffering is. But we don't stop there. We go on to see the second noble truth. There's a cause for suffering. And there's a way out of suffering. And that's called the Eightfold Path. Sort of, you put the Eightfold Path next to the Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limb tree of yoga, and you see all these correlations. Because they lived, that is Buddha and Patanjali, lived about 600, 700 years apart from each other, and one influenced the other. And the one that was influenced by the other, the one that influenced the other was influenced by Kapila, way back in earliest time, the king of cause and effect. Sankhya Yoga, it's called. This whole second chapter of Sri Krishna elucidates is called Sankhya Yoga. So it's the beginnings of causes and effects of everything that had a cause that should fill out our knowledge. You don't just sit and meditate. Before you master your posture, before you master your breathing, before you get yourself free of violence, ahimsa, before you get yourself free of falsehood, satyam, before you get yourself free of coveting the goods of others, whether it be your neighbor or in other countries, or before you get yourself free of too much obsession with objects of the senses, or before you get yourself free from gift giving and receiving with strings attached, or before you get yourself free of weakness via austerity, intensity, or before you get yourself free of all the other yamas and niyamas that are a part of yoga that I could go on listing. You don't meditate, because you can't meditate until you get those under your belt. You can meditate for 8, 10, 20 years and never go anywhere because you haven't learned to concentrate yet. Why have you not learned to concentrate? Because the mind is still attached to objects. Why is it still attached to objects? Because I haven't practiced detachment and mastered it. And therefore, what I'm becoming a master of is this rebirth in ignorance. We all master that, you see. We are masters of ignorant embodiment without knowing where we came from, why we came, where we're going, or who we are. Well, you know the teaching. If you ask why, then you're talking about cause and effect. So look into it. If you ask where, you're talking about space. So look into it. If you ask when, you're asking about time. So look into it. If you ask what, you're talking about objects. Those are the 4 W's. But there's a 5th W called who, which you should look into most deeply. Who am I? Atma Vichara. Trace yourself back to your true sentient nature and leave matter and nature out of the picture for a while. There's only one way to prove yourself that you're not matter, and that's by leaving matter alone. Who said that? Swami Vivekananda. There's only one way to prove that you're not matter, that's by leaving matter alone. So Holy Mother said about him, he sits after he gets out of the body like a wooden statue for 700 years without moving. Goes into a state of deep samadhi for centuries, which is like a blink of an eye to this person, Brahma, who himself, one of his days is a many yugas long. Yugas are 240 times 2 times 4 times 8, and then you add a bunch of those together. So you've got this immeasurably long length of time, which is just one of his days. And he hasn't even gotten to his night yet. So 700 years in samadhi is not too much time before a great soul like that will come back again amongst us, like this picture here in the room. From age to age I embody myself forth for the resurrection of the new Dharma and the destruction of the old Dharma. That is, the destruction of everything that's become old and decrepit and not of any use anymore, but taking those original principles from great teachings and teachers like Kapila, Lord Vashishta, whom we studied yesterday, Lord Buddha, Lord Patanjali, Jesus, Krishna, all the way up to Vivekananda in the present time. Then we know what the new Dharma is. It's called the new dispensation in this day and age. You'll find it in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the new dispensation. So that question, who, of the 5W questions is the best. But the other 4, you should look into them. If you look into where, then it's a space, right? Where am I? I'm in space. Where is space? It's inside another space. Physical space is inside a subtle space called pranakasha. That's this flow of prana. And that's not only just a flow of energy, it's also where your ancestors are. It's an akasha inside of you. It's one of those kingdoms of heaven Christ tried to tell John about. Like a little Russian doll tucked inside another. See? So if you go looking for it as a quantum physicist, you won't find it because you're looking outward into the grossest vibration, to the densest particle. But if you look inward, you'll begin to find this life by which man does not live alone. See, this prana. And then that's actually not just an energy, but it's also a space, an akasha. And you tuck that back inside the mind, and it's called manakasha. And then all of a sudden you're aware of your mind, and you can start searching your mind. That's called a kind of samadhi, called buddhi yoga. And it's also a kind of samadhi, vichara. Savitarka, savichara. What's in the mind can plunge you into ecstasy just by finding it and gazing within. So 700 years would be nothing to you, looking at that massive amount of mother wisdom that's playing inside of the human mind. Samadhi would then seem to be natural to you. People are calling each other up, saying, I'm having some really tasty maya tonight. Come over, share my maya with me. But people could just as easily be calling up, say, I'm going into samadhi later tonight. Would you like to join me? Because it's that natural. And if Ramakrishna showed us anything in the 1800s, and he showed us many things, the main thing was that the naturalness of samadhi, how easy he slipped into God-intoxicated states. Well, there is this set of impediments in way, and embodiment is one of them. We have to master it. Should a man be reborn? Vivekananda answered, I certainly hope he does not, until he can do so in full consciousness. So to get your full consciousness to bear, you have to know about these what, where, when, and why. You see, that time is an illusion, that space is multi-layered, and that objects are empty, and that I am Atma Brahma. That's this self is Brahman. That's the who of it. So we left off yesterday studying this set of slokas with Holy Mother's chart, and we didn't finish it. But let's reiterate. After the birth of a human body, some attain salvation in this life, whereas others take inferior births to reap the results of their karma. Not all can be free of desire, because desire is generally described as what brings us back into the body. The creation is going on because all cannot be free from desire. But that indeed is the last birth in which one gets rid of desires completely. One will not have to come again. Mother of the Universe tells us. Then, many a time a man takes birth and dies again and again in a certain family due to his karma. So it infers that, like pods of whales, beings are being born in families. Your family includes, your parents and ancestors, your loved ones, and your enemies. In case you haven't noticed, count your enemies as part of your family because they're there to stay until you resolve your karma with them. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, the world is a great pit and your relatives are vipers inside. It was not kind to the realm of the ancestors. On the other hand, he said, if your mother and father are not obstacles to your spiritual life, you should serve them like gods. But if they're obstacles, you have the right to renounce them. You can come back for them later, but you have to get free yourself. Exactly what Lord Buddha did. He married, had a son named Rahula, which, by the way, means chain around my neck. Then he left the world, you see, and got his nirvana. He went to Sankhya teachers first, because he was born in Kapilavastu. That's Kapila's birthplace, and Kapila was the father of Sankhya Yoga. Although I was in Nepal a year and a half ago, some of us were there, and when I said he was from India, they said, no, he's from Nepal, because the borders changed. You see. So now it's cute, the Nepalis are like claiming Buddha for their own. No, he's a Nepalese. I said, fine. I'm not going to argue, you see, the changing borders, the changing Maya. But in the case of the Buddha, yeah, claim him as your own. Is he strictly an Indian? Does nationality mean anything in samadhi? Or in deep sleep even? So, anyway, this problem with family, she infers here that families are born together again and again. So you try and release yourself of the karma associated with them. Too much love, too much hate. Or not enough of universal love and too much peculiar or particular love. One-sided love. The duck loves the water, but the water doesn't love the duck. So you could love all you want, but if it's not reciprocated, then it's not unconditional yet. So you have to train yourself up from selfish love to a sort of compromise, and then from a compromise to a one-sided love, and from a one-sided love to a universal love. It always goes from the specific to the more general. It runs the opposite way than most things. The spiritual life runs the opposite way. It starts with the more specific, and then it gets more general. Begins the accretion process. It begins to add on. It's an add-on always. It seems like it's an emptiness. It seems like it's a neti, a not this, a not this. But the whole thing is that when you see it all as empty, then you find it all in yourself, and then it's all yours, always was all yours, always will be all yours. So why are you vexing yourself about not having things? You should rather be happy that you've realized the emptiness of all things and made the connection that all these things come from your own mind. That's when people stop praying to God, because they realize God does not answer prayers. That God is not a person. That God is an eternal verity. And that they and their ancestors and the angels and the celestials and the gods and goddesses all the way up to Lord Brahma is responsible for this projection process. Leave God out of the picture. Pure and perfect. As Vivekananda said, do not drag God down to this world, to your comfort zones, but raise yourself up to that great verity. That's non-duality, if you can do it. And if you can't, then, like yesterday, you saw those 4 ways of perceiving God. See, if you cannot see God as your own self, then practice Abhyasa Yoga. If you cannot do practice, and I hear that all the time, oh, I just can't do practice. I can't keep my practice going every day. Well, then do Karma Yoga. Offer all your works to God. And if you can't even do that, then give up the fruits of work, he says. Because as soon as you renounce the fruits of work, you're free. So there are many ways of perceiving divine reality, many ways to skin a cat, as they said. But the cat is not going to like it. Say, trying to feed a pill to a cat in 16 steps, right? and then 1A, B, C, and so forth. Cat's not going to like it. I was a young veterinary's assistant for a while, so I know when I was a teenager. Okay, you hold one leg, I'll hold the other. Get the nurse in here and hold the front leg, hold that leg. Now I have to open the jaw and stick the pill down through those fangs, you see. It's sort of like trying to get rid of Maya, all the things very strong, struggles, slippery. So you might also equate that to the embodiment process. To wiggle your way out of this form is to have to neutralize karma so that you can be free, and you're going to have to think beyond the box, maybe before the box even. Before the box means my past lifetime, and equate that to your coming death, so-called death, because of course India doesn't believe in death. It's an illusion. It's just projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. That's all. Baby comes, great-grandfather goes. It's coming out of the same principle and going back into the same principle. Just the changing forms outwardly are shifting. That's the shifting sand you want to be careful of. If you're standing on the bedrock of Shiva, 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 then you won't ever be vexed at that appearance of things. Like Buddha getting outside of time and watching. See the time curving off in the distance. Oh, it curves, you see. Gee, guess what? It's coming back around me. It's a cycle. I think I'll get off the merry-go-round. I'm getting sick. I'm getting nauseous. I'm getting world-weary. And I want peace, peace, peace. I want the peace that passes all understanding. So when she says born again in families, then she gives us a clue. Also she says, but one should not blame God for this. So now she's inferring something even more divine and transcendental, that God is not involved in the karma process. Of course, God doesn't accrue karma. Krishna says that in the Gita, if you read early on, he'd say, God does not attribute actions and their fruits to humanity. Nature does all that. So when the soul gets together with nature, you see, and that admixture starts happening, I won't dare do it right now, see, because we'll have to wait another 45 lifetimes. 45 seconds in order for it to separate. Oh man, this is a drag, you see.
Oops.
Yeah, oops. So once you're into that process, you see, oil and water have to separate themselves. It takes a while. So how to avoid that? How to either avoid it entirely, or how to master the process in such a way where I can enter into the body without ever being born. Aham nirvikalpa, you see, as Shankara sings. We saw, yesterday we sang Namrit Jorna Shanka, Name Jati Beda. I have no death because I never had a birth in the first place. But he also sings Aham nirvikalpa Nirakara Rupa. Nirakara, no action, no cause. Rupa, no form. Vibhutvacha sarvatra sarvendriyanam. Then Chidananda Rupaha. What form am I, Rupa? The form of Chidananda, the bliss of consciousness. Shivoham, Shivoham. I'm Shiva, I'm Shiva. And don't forget, Om. In the beginning was the word. It's also at the end. And so all the slokas begin with Om, end with Om. The mantras begin with Om too. Brahman, you see, is like ending with Om. So she says then, do not blame God for this. Look into it yourself. Holy Mother's last words to us when she passed from the body were that if you want peace of mind, do not find fault with anyone. Rather, learn to look into your own faults. Vivekananda said that many times too. He says in his prayer for the day, these calendars that go by, the one that was there the day I left for the mainland from Hawaii was that one. Don't blame anyone else for anything. Look into your fault in this. You took your parents, so you can't blame them for your upbringing. You took your nationality. You took your gender. You accept responsibility for that. You can't change horses in the middle of the stream. Or if you do, it's going to play havoc with your karma and the karma of those around you. Individual and collective karma. So she says everyone reaps the effects of their own actions. And though one may have to take on a new body, one does not necessarily lose spiritual consciousness if one has one's merit credits from previous births. So it's not just a black and white scenario where if you're here, your prarabdha karma is still operative, like the arrow already shot from the bow. Can't call it back. So here you are. You've got to wait for perfection to happen. This pot needs to be shaped, and it's on the potter's wheel. All angularities removed. But after the pot's perfect, it goes on spinning, Shankara says. And that's this karma that's still left over from your past life that you're working out here. So again, it's a separation process that's going on even inside of a one lifetime scenario. So that renders you able to get free at the end of your lifetime. It brings in the possibility of moksha, mukti, kaivaya, freedom. Kaivaya means separation, isolation from nature. And Patanjali Yoga used it as the penultimate station to samadhi. You're going to have to, at that point, isolate yourself from nature, because nature is the producer of names and forms. Nature is the producer of actions and fruits for the human being. It's the field. And that field is made of thought, not air, earth, fire, water, and ether. You're only thinking about the physical cause, aren't you? But you're not thinking how my sight became the sun, and the sun illumined the earth, and my smell gave way to the earth, and my hearing gave way to the ethers. You're thinking of it ass backwards. So my teacher used to say, if consciousness comes down out from its pure place and identifies with water, it becomes a fish. If consciousness comes out and identifies with the senses of smell and hearing alone, becomes a dog. If it comes out and identifies with all five senses, it becomes a brutish human being. If it comes out and identifies with the intellect, it becomes a wise person, and so forth and so on. So the foundation has already been set and projected by these very senses, out of dream, out of deep sleep, into the waking state, in a trickle-down process that if you know it, you know the amber stairs of birth and death. You can go up and down them, as Aurobindo said, without any problem at the time of death. And the Tibetan book gives us a version of that. A version, not aversion. A version of that. We shouldn't have aversion to death. Dalai Lama himself said to me on stage once when I was playing music for one of his talks, we Tibetans look forward to the day of our death. So that's a refreshing thought. Vivekananda said something similar. He said, meditate on death. You might have heard that it's a sort of somber subject, you see. But no, it's actually very healthy to say, I now have no body. I now have no senses. I now have no mind. You see. And even Zen Buddhists say, if you sit on a zafu, you see, that one day in your zazen, your meditation practice, you're going to die on your cushion. So come tell me about that when it happens, the Roshi says. Oh, let's get together and you tell me what happened when you died on your cushion that day. How did it feel? So it's a different kind of couch than the psychiatrist's couch. How did that make you feel? He says, Zen Buddha said, how did that make you feel? See? You got beyond emotions and problems and the need for healing and all of that. And you went into the very inception of disease, and you transcended it. All disease is in the mind, Lord Vashishta says. And then according to your immune system, and I'm not talking about your physical immune system, I'm talking about your mental immune system, it all spilled forth, and manifested as various diseases, of which not one has ever been cured. That's what the healers are telling you nowadays. Every disease they thought was cured just came back in another form. So suffering is. You can't get rid of it. It's there to stay. So either you forbear it, or you start out forbearing it, and then you transcend it. Let this disassociation of the body with its pain be called by the term yoga. Who said that? Sri Krishna in the Gita. So she goes on, and though one may have to take on a new body, one does not necessarily lose spiritual consciousness if one has one's punya and papa. You see, especially punya, if one has one's merit credits from a past birth. So there, looking past the box, you see this past birth that you've gone through. And we already looked at the rest of this chart in terms of what are you trying to transcend. Your astral physical body, there's its components. Earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Marrow, bones, fat, flesh, blood, skin, nails. Speaking, handling, locomotion, excreting, procreating. Usually in sets of 5s, because this universe has come down in a quintuplication process. Your causal and subtle body, there's what they're made of. Or your subtle body, really. It's also 5 if you add in Brahma's mind, Mahat. You have a 5-fold mind. 5 subtle elements in dream tonight. You taste, touch, hear, smell, and see, and you work with the 5 subtle elements in dream, don't you? You have lakes and fires and lands and stuff that you create out of thought. And then you have the 5 senses of knowledge, smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, hearing, and those 5 modes of life force that we talked about, that your lungs are enacting 3 of them every time you breathe, and that you're also moving into other states of your consciousness tonight when you go to sleep and when you dream, is being carried by this life force. And then if you could see the several thousand souls who have died since I started talking an hour ago, if you could see where they're going, you'd see that they were going inward along these nerves, subtle nerve channels. If you thought of it like that, you have the gross nerves, but you have those subtle nerves, right, in a subtle body. And they're connected to an overmind, not a brain, but a mind. Two different things, brain and mind. And you thought, well, everything must be very tiny there, you see, because it's not atomic particles anymore. It's turned into a pranic particle. But it doesn't seem that tiny to you when you're in it. It's a huge channel you're flowing along. And you may be seeing other souls, and you may be seeing other worlds that are gigantuan. See, size doesn't really make any difference, as they say. And that applies doubly to spiritual life, to your subtle body. So you see these souls going inward to different levels of their own devising, as we just chanted, right? Very nicely put. The soul is divided and subdivided 100 and thousands of times. Whatever body it assumes, it becomes identified with that. And it passes in different forms to various places according to its deeds. So then it's going to be allocated to a certain level of its own attainment, and also lack thereof. So if it can't reach the light of Brahman or Buddha nature when it ends its existence, then it's going to have to choose a world. And if it can't graduate into a higher world, then it has to come back to earth. And basically, that's said in different ways, being inferred here and then put together with these bodies. She says, people with desires take their births again and again. Afterward, they go to other planes of existence and experience pleasure and pain, and in course of time are born again in human form. So those who are attached to physical and astral bodies do that. The teaching here about astral bodies, people say, oh, I got out of my body and I saw myself down there, and I said, get over it, because that's an outer world. You're taking an outer world and you're going further out and looking at it. But the kingdoms of heaven within you mean you're going to take on a subtle body, go inside and look at everything. And you don't see your body lying in bed when you do that. A runner running a race in a dream goes nowhere. His body isn't even known to him. But then he wakes back up on his bed, you see. Where did I go? Where was I? He went inside, saw his ancestors, or saw Jesus, or saw Muhammad, or had visions and dreams, or he experienced some trash in his mind. As Vivekananda said, the 1,000 imbecilities of the mind came to him in dream. So, what kind of a meditation did you have? It's much the same thing as saying, what kind of dreams did you dream last night? Where did you go in your own consciousness? What level did you visit? What did you become aware of? Or what were you left unaware of? So, as far as the subtle and causal body, she says, all people excepting highly advanced souls live in a spirit body for a year after death. The spirit body can be likened to a body made of air. So that's that akasha and that subtle body. You can't measure it by terms of outer things or meters or feet or yards or physical measurements. See, it has to be, it's like a body made of air. So a lot of souls, she says, will just take time off for a year. Kind of a bardo, the Buddhists say, a bardo state. And then, will find himself hanging upside down. And their mantra is, wah, wah, wah. And they don't know where they came from, and they forget their past lifetime, and then they have to try and make their way again. So these teachings arm you to the teeth, see, like the pirates of old. So you get armed to the teeth when you get these teachings prior to your death. And the longer you meditate on them, the deeper they're implemented into your mental body, the more sure you are about them in dreaming and deep sleep and at the time of passing from the body. That's good for you. That's salubrious asana. That's a mental asana that's healthy. Now, as far as the Atman, the true being, she says, only those who belong to a high spiritual category can be renunciates and gain liberation from all kinds of fetters. I bless you so that you may attain liberation in this life. Birth and death are extremely painful. May you not suffer them anymore. I loved, and still do, my teacher, who is the disciple of Holy Mother, whose picture's on the mantle there, Swami Sheshananda, taught here in Portland, Oregon, for many decades, up to into his 90s when he passed from the body. Sheshananda means no residue, the bliss of leaving nothing behind, nothing that could bind him into the rebirth process. And so as a monk for some 70 years, he attained that goal and became a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated soul, revered by beings all around the world, even though living here right in Portland and speaking to a group this small or a little bigger every week. But I love Holy Mother because she tells it as it is. She's not telling us to try and live a nice life and be happy here. She's following the words of those who say, birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here, or grant unto Caesar what is Caesar's, take up unto yourself what is the Lord's, and things like that. Tells it like it is so you can man yourself up, ennoble the mind, and realize the truth in this very life, and be free. Pass your time contentedly and be free after you realize the Atman. So the Atman body is more akin or allocated to the absolute world. Causal and subtle are a kind of transcendent world. And immanent world is the physical world, so that's why we say Shanti, Shanti, Shanti 3 times. To bring peace to all 3 worlds. Or to bring peace out of those 3 worlds if it's been buried under many mounds of earth, many mounds of confused thought. Now, the final here from Sri Ramakrishna, and then we can move on. Following the Maya of knowledge, step by step, one attains knowledge of Brahman. This Maya of knowledge can be likened to a last few steps of a stairway. Next is the roof. Some, after reaching the roof, go up and down the stairs. which is to say that they keep the ego of knowledge for helping others, for tasting divine bliss, and for sporting with the devotees. Of course, that epitomizes him to a T, we know that. He said, of the 7 chakras, when I came down, avatar means descend, when I came down only this far. And this was my dwelling place. This is the living room of the Lord, he says. He told that story. He said, if you visit a rich man, and he's got a huge palatial mansion amidst grounds, you're looking all over for him to talk with him, you'll probably be best advised to go to the parlor, because he likes to sit there in his easy chair with a pipe and brood on all his wealth. He's happy there, see. So you go straight to the parlor. He said that's what the heart is. It's like the drawing room of God. And there you can meet the devotees and meet with them and sing and dance and chant and share stories and imbibe wisdom. Satsang. So that's that 4th chakra. You see, there's 3 below and there's 3 above. But here is the chakra of love. See? So right there in the center. Ara Eva Ratanabao Samhatra Yatra Nadyaha Sa Eshon Chasterate Bahura Jayamanaha Om Ityevam Jayatha Atmanam Svasti Baha Paraya Tamasaha Parastat. There in the center, in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, right? Divided hundreds, subdivided hundreds and hundreds of times, like spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, is the Atman. Meditate on that self as Om, Omityevam, Jayata, meditation, Atmanam. Meditate on that Atman as Om. And Svastivaha Paraya Tamasaha Parastat. Yes, Godspeed to you. In crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness, there's the poetic in it and the declaration. O ye children of immortal bliss, I have seen the truth. And I have come back to tell it to you. I'll leave a record of it for you. The revealed scriptures. I'm not talking about silly things. Fundamental scriptures. Original sin. Who owned what tet peg and in which generation of a wandering tribes or herds, you see. All pure truth. Getting to the point. That soul is as subtle as a thread, divided into 100,000 strands and branching inward into the kingdoms of heaven. And the souls are coursing along in and out. It's a great thing to meditate upon. So he likens that to going up and down the steps. Maybe that's where Sri Aurobindo got that saying from Sri Ramakrishna, because he admired him so highly. As I went up and down the amber stairs of birth and death, at will, free, a free soul, living liberated soul, Jivan Mukta. Some other ways of looking at this, and we move on, is, of course, I mentioned this yesterday, so we can just look at it briefly, is the links in the chain of Buddhism. Buddhism, very much like Vedanta in its teachings, these are called nidanas. See those 12 links of a chain? These three lifetimes, you see, is basically what you're talking about. The previous existence, the present existence, and the future existence. So these links pertain to how the soul gets brought back in ignorance. Basically, first you fail to affirm the suffering-ridden nature of existence. It's like you can't be a Buddhist until you accept the First Noble Truth. There is suffering. So if you fail to affirm that, and you still think the world is your oyster, then you're a pseudo-Buddhist or a pseudo-Vedantist or a pseudo-spiritualist. You have to be very clear about that I want out. I've been in the bath long enough. I'm clean. I want out. So of course, if you're not clean, then you enter into yoga sadhana. You read these sadhana scriptures, and you purify the body, mind, senses, and you purify the mind, chit, shuddhi. Because remember, chit happens. So you have to be very careful of chit. It's everywhere. It's above, it's below, it's beyond. Chit everywhere, on all sides. So you must transcend it. Purify it. And then when you do, you get beyond that mental world and into the intellectual, and beyond the intellectual into the spiritual. So failure to affirm the suffering-ridden nature of existence and renounce it is the first link. Second is subtle deposits form in the physical, psychological body due to acts and thoughts and words. Then awareness gets crystallized by previous life experiences and enters wombs. That's the series going from Nidana 1 and 2, the previous existence, to the present existence. Then finally, or in the middle, Namarupa, a fresh body is formed based on past impulses and impressions. Then experiences springing from exposure to the realms of the senses develop more karma. Then intermingling with the world and its people and its objects contributes to more karmic condition. It reminds us of the will of the wisp, which drags with blinking light to pile more gloom on gloom. This is an exacerbated karma. Soul is not aware of what it's letting itself in for when this is happening. Then sparsha, intermingling with the world and its people, contributes to karmic conditioning, as I said. Then vedana, continual and repeated stimulation of body and senses, adds further conditioning. That is, this thirst for life and repeated physical and pleasurable experiences, always coming with pain, so there's always an admixture there. Then desire for further contact flames up with objects in order to try to gain a satisfaction that never comes. Then selfish clinging to sense life enmeshes the mind deeper. Then, due to decay of the old body, the desire for a new body arises. And passage from birth to death occurs under karmic circumstances, resulting in another body. And finally, after life and passage from the new body, life gets perpetuated in another body. They say many times the soul has already chosen its next birth before it even evacuates the old body. So it's already found parents and wants to project itself there. Like one Vedanta teacher told me, like an inchworm, you see. It's like moving along, inching himself along, and feeling out here. It can't find anything. Finally, it finds a purchase point. A good purchase point there, as an example. And then it drags itself over, you see. So lots of times there's still a connection to the old body, and the new body's already been planned. And the attempt at being reborn will happen. Could be, like she said, a year or 100 years, depending on that soul's need to get back. And that could also depend on different factors. It might be very densely ignorant, so it comes back immediately into a poor birth, a lower birth, as Krishna says. Or it could plan itself out better and want to and have some knowledge. It's merits from past births, and so it takes its time to select its next situation to give itself every opportunity to get free. You might have suspected something like that in your own case. So you say, well, all these things that are happening to me, maybe I planned those. And now they're just my marriage, my birth, my parents. Maybe that was all my doing, see. And then it just opens up to you. One friend of mine in the old days said, I had a powerful dream. A sage visited me and revealed 4 very powerful things that would happen to my life. When I woke up, I forgot all 4 of them. And then I only remembered the dream and the sage when each one of those happened to me throughout my life. See? So that predestination, to borrow a term, is there, but it's been precognized by the soul, and it's set up for itself. So it gives itself every opportunity to get free, but what if it fails? See? And all of that has been for naught. So that's what's called Anavasti Tattavani by Patanjali, or other 7 or 8 syllable words in Sanskrit. It means basically failure to make progress, taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, or indeterminacy, compromise, short-circuiting your own progress once you've set it up for yourself. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the Nidanas because we'll get to them in May at the retreat up the Columbia River Gorge near the Wind River, beautiful retreat there for 3 days over Labor Day weekend. Please check into SRV. Memorial Day weekend, sorry. And we will look into the Buddhist teachings because that's May, and that's the time when Buddha was born. So look into that whole darshana of Buddhism in its connection with yoga and Vedanta at that time. But you can see the basic gesture outlay. Now there's other ways of putting this that I put up here, and we have about 10 minutes or so before our break. So these two charts can be looked at. Both of these are from the great Lord Vashishta, who is one of the 10 mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, the projector of the Trinity. This one we always have fun looking at because it's like a spider web, as you can see. And in the middle there is the mind in bondage, and it makes this process. So if you follow the arrows, you are here. You go like this. And what you'd like to do at that point when you've set everything up for yourself is pierce through that Brahma Granthi or that Vishnu Granthi or that Rudra Granthi, those 3 membranes against spiritual awakening, and go on towards a glimpse of truth and have a new life, a better lifetime. But quite often this whole lower part of the web is what the soul circulates on. First, it projects a world of dire illusion and dwells in it. That's impure mind. Then, impure in Vedanta and Samkhya really doesn't mean necessarily morally impure. It means far from the source. The further things get from Brahman, the more impure they become, means the less real they are. The more illusory they are, the less healthy they are for you. It's like, say, having cotton candy for your breakfast. You see, things that just give you no nourishment whatsoever, but they're sweet and saccharine sweet, and they just don't nourish you at all. So beings are living on them nonetheless, but they're living a very weak existence and aren't able to drum up any spiritual sustenance. So that's what just a definition of ashuddha, or impure mind. Doesn't necessarily mean wicked or evil or so forth. It means just far flung, far from the source. So as it moves down this web, it moves restlessly and bleeds amidst the sharp brambles and thorns of sense objects. It's actually a story about manas, the mind, and how it fell into rebirth again and again. It's a story in the Yoga Vashishta. And Lord Brahma himself, we had that first of the Trinity there, and Lord Vashishta, his mind-born son, Lord Brahma said, I'm going to take you to this world where Manas lives, and I want you to watch and observe Manas, how he goes around the cycle, falls back into the well, and then gets out again, lives the same way again, falls back into the well. Basically samsara, or the wheel of birth and death. And so they watched for a long time, and finally Vashishta said, I can't stand this anymore, can't you just intervene and help him? So, all right, if you wish. So they went and talked to Manas, and he wouldn't listen. He was crazy. He was a scattered mind. And finally, Vashishta said, I throw up my hands. You can't strew pearls before swine. Let's just leave. This soul's impossible. And Lord Brahma said, wait. So they waited a long time, and finally Manas climbed out of just before he died in one of his lifetimes, he gave a shout of laughter and then fell into the well. The next time he climbed out, he was a different mind. And so it took him a long time to come into cognition of his plight of suffering in rounds of birth and death. But something finally developed in him through all that experience. Not the best way, not the best scenario. It's not what Vashishta is advising by any means, but it showed Lord Brahma's infinite patience with the human soul. So that's why you get some of these descriptions, because Manas would always jump into these sharp brambles and thorns, and then later he would jump into pleasure gardens, you see. Back and forth he would do this. In the meantime, he subjected himself to endless pains by self-inflicted whips of unfulfilling desire. Then he dug a well of darkness and frequented it in abject misery. Then he sought relief from ignorance and by taking refuge in pleasure. Big mistake. Then he projected a pleasure garden, but soon found out that he got bored of it, and tired of it, and because if he glutting himself in pleasure, he lost his energy and fell into remorse and depression, and then died in that state. But this one lifetime I was telling you about, where Lord Brahma worked with him, the soul would finally get a glimpse of the truth, but only at the moment of death. It's kind of a pivotal point in the soul's transmigration processes, where they will wake up finally, but it will be too late to really do any sadhana or any practice around it. That's why Holy Mother said, make sure that you do all these things young while you can, and get this truth under your belt young. Your pilgrimages, your retreats, your gaining of wisdom, your meditation practice, and then serve others of God as God in the karma yoga way, so that by the time you're old, you're well established in spiritual life, and your passage would be easy. But not the case with these souls. Gains a glimpse of truth, and at the moment of death wakes up, only to find out too late it's about to die. But then it's reborn with half-developed wisdom, and it seeks for guidance. A lot of people coming to gurus and acharyas and teachers and trying to develop a spiritual life. The fishermen along the river really didn't have a spiritual life. So Jesus said, loaves and fishes and wives and nets and rivers and huts, those are all well and good. I see you have that part. But you don't have this ability, you don't have an inner life yet, you just have an outer life. So I will teach you the truths of inner life, and then I'll make you fishers of men, not just fishers of fish. Because if consciousness comes down and identifies just with water, it becomes a fish. So if consciousness comes down and identifies with the bound human condition, it becomes a seeker, we would think. And it needs guidance. And if it does, it gains holy company, grace of a wise teacher, and initiation into the path. For us, that's called mantra diksha. For the Buddhists, it's called taking refuge in the Dharma. For the Sufis, it's called taking hand in the Sufi order, and so forth. Or baptism was originally, I think, John the Baptist's way of initiating people. So there are these ways of entering into the beautiful religious traditions of the world, and finding an end, as Vivekananda said, not to be born in a church. It's good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. So you start off with religion, and you must gain spirituality from it. Finally, masters desires and breaks attachments and attains jnanam, discriminating wisdom. That's where samsara cycles end. It attains the incomparable state of Parabrahma, the Supreme Brahman, and that's a pure mind. So it would break the web of Maya there, no connection anymore, and it would remain in that incomparable state of Brahmagyan. After the break, then, we will get to look at a story of Sukra and how he fell into everything from being a fragrance to a cluster of bamboo, and worked his way through all of that and became a high, noble soul that he originally was. It's all a dream. It's a dream projection. What you think you are, who you think you are. You're always that Supreme Brahman. But the scriptures are full of stories of people taking sojourns away from that realization, and also the great victories they gain by returning. It's like the bees flying in and out of Mother Kali's hair. They like to merge black with black, and they fly away so they can have that beautiful feeling of turning and coming back and joining with her. So there's beautiful symbologies in that dream of life and death, or transmigration of souls. So we'll continue more on in this subject after the break. And the live stream audience can look at these charts close up while we break for 15 minutes. Thank you. Carefully now. Welcome back to our second half live streaming audience and those of us gathered here in Portland, Oregon at the SRV, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda Associations of Hawaii, San Francisco, and Oregon. And we have been looking into the very inscrutable and wonderful, foreboding principle of rebirth and karma. As Holy Mother has said to us in the chart we inspected before in the first half, that this birth and death process is going on because people can't be free of desire. So it's actually a kind of a direct indicator if you want to live a higher life or spiritual life, even if it be in the world or transcending the world, either one, then you could look to this vasana, this word in Sanskrit called vasana. Vasana samskaras are desires done over and over again that turn into impressions in the mind. The yogi avers that that's what causes and brings people back from birth to death and death to birth, drags the soul from birth to death and death to birth. But that one conquers everything, who conquers self, conquers ego self, and installs a new God on that throne in place of the ego. Or if you want to put it less anthropomorphically, you could say just pretty much works to realize the all-pervasive Atman in everything, and naturally transcends the individual self. As I said earlier, becomes the indivisible self. Whether that happens over a series of lifetimes or it happens immediately is sort of a moot point, because if a person wakes up from ignorance, their past lifetimes will be as if forgotten. That is, it's not who you were or thought you were, or the things you did that's important when you see your past lifetimes. It's that string through the pearls, who you actually were as you took on those lifetimes, that becomes free of you. So if you're at some New Age gathering or something and somebody tells you, oh, I was Mary Queen of Scots, or I'm Elvis come back, or whatever, then you could say, well, that kind of misses the point of seeing. That's not what the seers like Sri Krishna say when they say, I've seen my past lifetimes, all the way back to Vishvasvat, who taught the original yoga. So it's who you are that comes to the fore, not these personalities, this march of personalities, the personality parade, as they say, the name of a magazine, I think, in the old days, Personality Parade. Those were all bubbles rising in the ocean of consciousness, but the ocean of consciousness remained the same. The many change in paths, the one remains the same. Life is a many-colored dome that stains the pure white light of reality, to paraphrase Shelley, the poet. So the light remains the same, the many change in paths, but the light passes into the mind. The mind is a many-colored dome, and the white light turns many colors, and that turns into the various worlds, and the various worlds spill down into the physical. And it's all a projection from the cosmic mind through the collective to the individual mind. And as I was saying before, to know the complete picture, you need to take your consciousness with you in the involution process back to the source. That is, the apparent source. Back to the origin of things, which, according to Christ and others, the Tantrists of India, that he probably got that from. It's all under the auspice of the word. They call that the unstruck sound, the word. It hums by itself, nobody strikes it, the Tantras say. And that hum is what you hear when all form goes into a deep sleep and the sound takes you over, or the light takes you over. Depends on what kind of temperament you have. It's either light or sound, shabda or jyoti. And it's also what goes away when you come back into form. When you inhabit the senses away, that very light, that very sound disappears. That is, you become unawares of it. So to keep awareness of it would be a part parcel of a very important element in that conscious rebirth and conscious death. Because conscious passing and conscious coming. Although Vivekananda said coming and going is all nonsense, for the soul who's still under the illusion of coming and going, it's important to them. The mind is not going to be that important after you get to Brahman. It's not that important in deep sleep tonight, is it? Because it's shut down and you're in bliss. You just don't remember it. So that mind's awareness, if you can take that with you, that's what we keep repeating over and over again. And that's precisely what Shukra forgot to do in this chart that we're showing here from Yoga Vashishta. It's the illusory ego's projection via rebirth, and you can see by his example how he fell into a big stupor, a big Mayic stupor. He was a very realized soul, and just got disoriented coming down the amber stairs of birth and death. He resided in a very high, formless place, but you could say one of the dangers is the occult powers are always there. You have full dominion over all these worlds, and you see them like Lord Brahma. And all of a sudden you see this particular heaven in Indra's realm, and you see this beautiful goddess in form, and you love her, and you go there, and you get seduced, you see, and then you live hundreds of lifetimes with her, and then you take your parting. That's what happened to him, and when he took his parting from her, he tried to get back to his higher station in his consciousness, and caught a glimpse of earth, and got attracted by moonlight falling on a snowy field in a farmer's farm, and got enchanted there, and his attention just became fixed on that. And then his attention became rain, and rain fell and watered that field, and that turned into rice paddy, and that rice paddy was taken by the farmer, turned into semen, that is one of the meanings of sukra, and given to the wife in the womb, and turned into fetus, and he was born. Basically is the story. You don't get stories like that just anywhere, by the way, folks.
My mother used to tell me that one. My mother told me that one.
Oh, your mother told you that one. Yeah, when you came out of the womb. So from the cradle to the grave, as my teachers just say, they come and go without knowing. And even great souls can fall then into this mental projection with its beauty. We had the 5 cosmic bondages up here yesterday, and remember one of those was attraction to nature. Attractions to the beauty of nature, you have to be aware of that. It can become very enchanting. So there's a story of one Swami told where he said, one of his disciples was with him and went into a room in a city with a beautiful ocean view from the hotel room, and he went over and closed the curtains. And the devotee said, "Why did you do that, Swami? It's so beautiful view." And he says, "Because I have everything I want inside." So even there, though, you would say there would be some danger for a soul like Sukra, because he can look at all the worlds from the inside out. He's actually sort of a champion of the worlds, because he's overseeing. Krishna calls it loka sangraha. So if you're living in a very sattvic state, or a pure sattvic state, if you're in a transcendent state, it doesn't really matter because you don't see form anymore. But if you're in this sort of causal state, and you're keeping a causal body at a very high level, then you look out, as it were, and you see all these worlds, and you sort of oversee them, and you're always interested. So he got attracted to Indra's realm, where he met Visvachi, I think her name was, this beautiful goddess, and they sported together in lifetimes, as I was saying, and then parted at that time, and he got disoriented. So in that disoriented process, he begins to falls from Indraloka and gets into sankalpic projection. Now, there's words in Sanskrit we just don't have equivalents for in English, which is why we need to learn some Sanskrit. It's like if you go to Spain on vacation, you'll have a good time, but if you don't know Spanish, you really won't understand a lot. If you learn Spanish and then go to Spain a couple of years later, you have a much deeper communion with the location. So it's the same with Sanskrit. If you come to Vedanta or Buddhism and you don't know the meaning of his words, they'll sound profound to you, and maybe you can make some progress. But if you start learning some of these great words, then you have equivalents in the ancient language of spirituality, Deva Bhashya, they called Sanskrit, the language of the gods, language of enlightenment, because there are just so many unspoken and subtle principles that are a part of the spiritual concourse that you have with great souls and Sangha that never come up in daily conversations, so you're never reflecting on them. And reflection is, of course, one of the mainstays of a spiritual aspirant. Contemplation, if you will. So learning these words like sankalpa really just means there's sankalpa and vikalpa, but there's also nirvikalpa. So sankalpa would be with time. Kalpa is kind of imaginings in time. Kalpaniya. Kalpanika, I think, is the word in Sanskrit. It's imaginings in time. So they've always thought about life, and whether it's the waking state or the dreaming state, as a type of dream. Ramana Maharshi said that. This is dream number 1, and then you're going to dream number 2 tonight. So that's all a sankalpic process from Lord Brahma on down through all these levels of trillions of souls spread over 7 worlds and 5 akashas. And so vikalpa, if you take that transformation of the word, it means projection based in desire and fantasy. But if you say nirvikalpa, it's the highest word in Vedanta. It means nirvi, completely eradicated or made extinct any kind of imagination process, any kind of conceptual process, any kind of hopes or fears for heaven, earths, or hells, or any kind of name and form. It's been eradicated in you. The seeds have been burnt. They will not sprout again. And then the soul can come like an Sheshananda, free of residue. That's my teacher's name. It can come and go as he pleases without transgressing any laws, and also free of coming and going, free of birth and death while still being born. It's a very interesting proposition there to reflect on, like action and actionlessness. Krishna says in the Gita, there's karma good, there's karma bad, there's karma mixed, but there's also no karma or inaction. There's action and there's inaction. Well, as Sukra meditated, he was like that Parabrahman and Atman, and the Atmic Sankalpa, because there's also a version of Sankalpa that's very pure, is like the word just shedding light of intelligence. Intelligence is the first thing out the gate in our tradition. Later comes will, and after that comes choice. So intelligence is first, and it's the very essence of consciousness that's coming off of the word, like a sun emitting rays. So there you see kind of the sun and the rays of Jnana light coming and informing the mind of Lord Brahma at a cosmic level as to how to project the world out of pure intelligence. So even if you come down to this very world, it's not that knowledge is in a book, knowledge is the book. See? It's not just you get nourishment from food, but intelligence is the food. It's come out of your own mind. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagna, Brahmanahotam, everything is Brahman. The food is Brahman, the giving of the food is Brahman, the eating of the food is Brahman, the one who eats is Brahman, the plates are Brahman, the nourishing power in the food is Brahman. So that way of living in a non-dual state is suggested over and over again by these words of wisdom. So that everything here is just microphone and camera and audience and is all just intelligence made manifest. Now, if you don't know that word, then this is all Maya. Everything is a Maya, and it has to be feared. You have to be careful. You have to inspect it, scrutinize it, withdraw from it, detach. And because you've fallen into some sort of a Mayic problem like that. But if you know the process up and down, inside out, from all sides and so forth, then you call it, this is all a manifestation of Brahman. That's how you get to that great statement, all is Brahman, without transgressing Advaitic axioms. Because it's very subtle. You say, oh, isn't all this Brahman? Well, the thing itself isn't Brahman. Brahman cannot be a thing or a thought or an object or an energy. But yes, Brahman is in everything as its substratum. It's underlying everything. Take the ocean away, there can be no waves. But take the waves away and the ocean is still resting peacefully, blissfully in the sun. And that sun is this jnana wisdom that's flowing throughout all the universes. So that's why I say in that last chart, the spiderweb chart here, right? Get that wisdom. That's jnana. See, attains jnana and breaks the cycles of existence, snaps the chain of birth and death. The nirdanas go, and there's no more rebirth for you in ignorance. Only emanation from the sun of knowledge. So here's the birth of Sukra, the son of Brigu, one of the most hoary and brilliant of all rishis was Brigu. And he had a son, Sukra, mind-born son. And he saw Indra's realm and saw the goddess Visvachi and decided to project there in the Sankalpic way, appeared there, made his acquaintance with Indra, saluted him, passed into Indra's realm, and met Visvachi, sported with her in this Indraloka. Then you could see this process that I was just describing. Mingles the mind with the moon's rays, falls on paddy fields, enters in his prana into the form of snow, falls on paddy fields, melts, nourishes rice, becomes food, gets eaten by a Brahmin priest, converted into sperm, given to the wife, and then the birth of Sukra happens. He's first born as a priest like his father. He performed austerity for one Manvantara, which is a very, very long set of yugas. He married and had offspring. He became enslaved to the world. Then a series of lifetimes in the world ensued, as a fragrance, a cluster of bamboo, a swan, a boa constrictor, a hunter, and then, as karma would have it, a stag being hunted. Then he became a chieftain of a hill tribe, a ruling king, king of the Vidyadharas, which are holders of wisdom, king of a solar line, which is a very high birth, like Rama's father, guru of a solar race, even higher birth, son of a Muni, and the guru of the Shaivites. So he had a succession of very high births as a human being. And then he became Vasudeva, the son of a rishi. A birth like this is very hard to attain in this world, Arjuna, Krishna told his disciple. And at that point then he was doing austerities on the riverbank when Brigu, his father, woke up in meditation, saw his son next to him. They had gone into meditation together and his son was just like a corpse. And so Brigu went looking for death and say, "How dare you take my son?" And death was scared because a rishi like Brigu has transcended death, so he's much more powerful than death. So death's trying to reason with Brigu. Actually, it was your son's fault. It wasn't my fault. He got attracted to Indraloka, and here I'll show you the cosmic record, the Akashic record. Look at this, what happened. And please don't be angry at me, because he could blast death. So then Brigu understood, being a reasonable person, more than reasonable person, and so he went looking for Sukra and found him on the riverbank as Vasudeva. They went into meditation again and attained their station with each other at a very high level. And there's some other facts of the story, filler, and all of that is very interesting to read if you want to take up the Yoga Vashishta. I did my own version of the Yoga Vashishta that took some of the great stories and put it into English for all of you. So it's here on our bookshelf. And there are other versions of Yoga Vashishta too available. But here is Lord Vashishta's way in the Yoga Vashishta of saying, just as a stone may have many faces or figures carved in it, so too in the one Brahman all worlds and lives manifest themselves. Sometimes he says like a soapstone or a piece of wood, sandalwood, they carve many different worlds in it. You've seen those really intricate carvings in a piece of wood, and there are many levels and these strata and so forth. And dragons are there, and people and animals and different things. And so all in one piece of wood, these forms are appearing. So just like that, in this one consciousness, all these worlds are appearing, peopled with so many different creatures of the mind's own designing, sankalpa, vikalpa again. So this puts a teaching like this in a sort of different perspective so that we can see in a more personalized way what happens to the soul. And this is in sort of a more philosophical way to fill in all the gaps in our thinking process about rebirth, that because we haven't been taught it. It's a one lifetime scenario in science, in psychology, Western psychology, and medicine, and so forth. So to become aware that the soul takes these different lifetimes, to know that these lifetimes are mental projections, dreamlike, and that the soul, in that case, is the ego-mind mechanism, but there's a great oversoul looking on. And there's also a sadhana which you can do that informs you of this process and then gets you free of it. All those things are included in the import of the reincarnation and rebirth teachings of Vedanta and Buddhism and yoga and so forth. Very convincing and very good to know for a person who wants to meditate on the kingdoms of heaven within. So, in accordance with that, soul assumes many forms, but soon envelops everything and becomes free from all fetters. The embodied soul chooses many forms, gross, subtle, and causal, based on the qualities belonging to itself, to the actions, to the mind. And it's subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds and thousands of times. Yet is potentially infinite. And effulgent like the sun. Some of these suggestions from the Upanishads give you plenty of ammunition or material for contemplation. Now, you could count in stock of where I am here. Yes. I wanted to show you the alternative to this rebirth process as described by Vivekananda. This is all taken out of some of his teachings. The word there that's so important is aparinama. Parinama means changefulness, and aparinama means no transformation. They assign aparinama to Brahman. That is, Brahman cannot change its nature. It's already pure and perfect, formless, nameless. So it's not going to change that. You cannot change it, because then you would be transgressing the laws of Advaita and non-dualism, and it would belie the fact of nirvana and samadhi and all that. So Brahman is pure and perfect, changeless, timeless, deathless, immortal, eternal, and it doesn't change. So that word, in one word you could say, that's called aparinama, non-transformation. It's one of the earliest of all great truths. The other one being ajativada, no birth, no death. So those, you can see how they connect. In that circle then you see some of the words for that unchanging reality. Brahman, Paramatman, Pratyagatman, Antaryami. We had that word yesterday, is the inner ruler, immortal, seated in the heart. Kutastha means a subtle substratum, like a subtle foundation that's in everything. Sakshi, the witness of all phenomena. And then Om at the bottom of the circle, which is this line of demarcation that separates formlessness from the beginnings of form. When form kicks in, then you have Maya in operation. That's parinama. That's change. The parent world of change kicks in. Name, form, time, space, causality. Prakriti is then available in its unmanifested form first as subtle matter, and then later as gross matter. So if you go into deep sleep tonight, that's why they say that's not samadhi. It's a very high state, but what you do is actually you're in the world of formless matter. And there's no forms there, but there is still that press of tamas, rajas, and sattva, the three gunas. And all forms are potential there in your mind, in that deep sleep mind. Your causal state, they call it. Everything has come from that state and burgeoned into the dreaming state and then burgeoned further into the waking state. So those three states of your consciousness are there. The reason why they're different from the fourth state of consciousness called turiya or samadhi is precisely that reason, is because unmanifested prakriti has kicked in and form is about to become manifest. And it will rise, from a seemingly formless state and take a form and then go back to the formless state again, constantly in cycles. So it's already beginning to project a sort of hypnotism on the soul that time and space and causation and change are real when they're not. And beings are taking them as real, like Sukra did and like Manas did, are going to suffer those different levels of Maya. Apparent transformation. Let's go back then to his quote to understand that. A kind of scientific Advaitism, or non-dualism, has been spreading throughout Europe. He's saying this in the late 1800s, ever since the theory of the conservation of energy was discovered. So he had an eye on science. But all that is parinama, evolution by real modification. In other words, people think that things are evolving really, that evolution is actual, that things actually get formed and are created. But how can you create something out of nothing? So everything from Samkhya and Yoga and Vedanta and Buddhism says, no, it has to come out of something that was there, but that something was formlessness. You just didn't see it. And that formlessness was not the highest formlessness. It was a provisional formlessness. And that's your deep sleep state. I mean, you don't know anything in deep sleep, so consciousness obviously isn't fully awake there. Not like here when your eye be single, you should know the truth. It's fully awake there. But it's not so fully awake down here in these lower centers. So he's, just to explain that because it gets a little bit abstruse there, all that is called parinama, evolution by real modification. And he says then, as contrasted to aparinama, progressive manifestation by unreal superimposition. That is that the minds are superimposing names and forms using nature and the projection process. And then there seems to be modifications going on. And that's how Advaita looks at it. It's all vivarta, false superimposition of name and of the nameless formless, of name and form over the formless reality. That's not an actual projection. It's a dream projection. It'd be sort of like green scum collecting on the water and veiling your reflection. If you put the green scum away with your hands, you'd see yourself, and then the scum would come dancing back. So that's Maya veiling Brahman. And then you have to do some effort to get the original Brahman again. But if you don't keep that effort up, don't keep your consciousness there, the green scum just comes dancing back, and you can't see yourself again. So he further says about this, Ramanuja, who is the qualified non-dualist in India, his theory is that the bound soul has its perfection involved, and when this perfection evolves, it becomes free. So it's a qualified non-dual idea. All of this has become Brahman. Brahman has become all this, rather, and we're not seeing it because we're imperfect. But as soon as we perfect our mechanisms, then we'll see all of this as nothing other than Brahman. So it's second best step, sadhana. My teacher used to say, if we really knew who we were, we wouldn't have to do spiritual disciplines. We wouldn't have to meditate. We wouldn't have to study scripture. But since we don't, then we have to engage in this spreading of the scum, you see, of the green scum of Maya, so we can get a glimpse of ourselves. And that's what an aspirant is, or a seeker. The Advaitin declares, however, that involution and evolution take place only in show. Remember, Lord Copula yesterday had that beautiful saying where he said, the dancer appears on the stage in front of the audience and performs. Then she disappears off stage. So nature, Prakriti or Maya, comes and dances in front of the soul for a while and then disappears. And that's happening in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep all the time. Nature and Maya come forward and present itself to you and do their little dance, you see, and then you go into deep sleep and it all subsides. Wake up, it comes back. So in a 24-hour period you can experience that, or you can even experience it in one breath, breathe in, hold, breathe out, and that's one cycle. And form and formlessness and their suspension are all there. Kumbhaka is suspension. Rechaka would be birth, and Kumbhaka would be sustenance, and Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka. Puraka would be birth, Kumbhaka would be suspension or sustenance, and Rechaka would be death or elimination, the out-breath. So, or it can happen to you over a lifetime. So the breath is one circle like this, and then there's another circle going around like this. And then if I had 4 hands, I could start doing this, and then another grand cycle out here, and it's all cyclic. So these circles of cause and effect are inside of of one another, like Russian dolls again, inside of each other, from gross to subtle to causal, and that's all very hypnotic for the soul. It gets lost in that. And pretty soon, there's no lake there, it's all green scum. The green scum is the reality, and there's no such thing as my reflection or my Atman. There's no such thing even as the ocean of Brahman in which I can see myself. It's just atheism, materialism, and so forth. So a parinama is a beautiful thing to contemplate. It's all in show. Both processes are in Maya, that is, evolution and involution are both in Maya, so they're apparent. Or like Krishna said, quoted in the first half, God does not create actions and their fruits. Nature does all that. So Maya or nature or Prakriti is doing all that in its manifest and unmanifested form. But the soul should be reading the book of nature without moving and putting it down and picking it back up to refresh itself and putting it down, always knowing that it's stationary, that it's stable. Shiva, Shiva, as we were singing. Otherwise, you have, speaking of singing, you have those beautiful songs which are nonetheless sobering. When he says, Kali, Kali Borashana, Kali, Kali Borashana. Sing the name of Mother Kali and free yourself from mundane diversions and vain pursuits. And he goes on, he sings, Gela, Gela, Kavi Pale, Gela, Dekana Kalanta Nikalela, Ra Prasad Bale Bala Kali Kali Bol, Durha Bekal Jama Jantrana, Kali, Kali Borashana, Kali, Kali Borashana. The ebb and flow of time passes continually, and life's experiences are spent in vain, in cycles. At any time, death, the destroyer of name and fame, of name and form, can come and draw near and reduce your life's work to nothing. Therefore, it's time to heed Mother's minstrel, he says. Ramprasad, the singer of the song, it's time to heed Mother's minstrel, who solemnly declares that repeating Kali's name destroys the illusion of death. He has other songs where he sings, I have received a command from the Divine Mother of the universe that death must die. Beautiful songs about death and its destruction and its illusion in Ramprasad. We probably will have that retreat I've always wanted to put on sometime of just Ramprasad's songs on death. It would be different than, say, what's being given out there in terms of rebirthing, or hospice, how you accompany a soul at the time of death to pat them. Oh, it's okay, but they don't give them any kind of information or any kind of wisdom about death or guidance beyond death or rebirth in consciousness. What's happened to all of that? That's far more important than just being there and comforting someone at the time of death. Maybe they don't even want you there. I wish this guy would go away so I could die. Get this over with. So basically, beautiful songs like that are there in the tradition and telling us about this process. And if we know words like aparinama in Sanskrit, then we'll have a way of tagging it. We'll have a way of putting our finger on it, of indicating it. Oh, I see, that's all parinama, but my teacher told me aparinama, non-transformation, is the truth. Brahman does not transform itself. It cannot change. And therefore, anything that changes is not Brahman, is not the essence of Brahman. It could be its manifestation, could be its reflection. It even could be an illusion, like the son of a barren woman. Does that make sense to you, son of a barren woman? See, that's how illusory Maya can get. Things that are just completely nonsensical. And people are actually accepting some of those things to be the truth. So it's one thing to accept nature and form and birth, life, death to be the truth, but to accept complete delusion as being the truth is an evolute of Maya in the Kali Yuga, where whole nations and races are deluded as to the nature of reality and their true nature too. Well, maybe this quote and some of its teachings, which are again rather abstruse, something to sit with for a while. Vivekananda was very adequate in explaining high truths to us, and he didn't spare us the rod sometimes that he wanted to wake us up with. So some of these quotes here are nice. Gaudapada says, all happenings taking place in relativity resemble the activities of a man running a race in a dream. Nothing actually transpires. Scenery, movements, race, dream, all are unreal, or apparent only. The dreamer alone is real, but he must awaken to realize it. So then you have the Upanishad sayings, from dreams awake, from bonds be free. Know the truth, thou art he, thou art she. So the jiva is Shiva, in other words. You are that reality, and nothing should ever come in the way of realizing that and living in that truth ever again. Should make fear afraid of itself, make doubt doubt itself, put death in its own grave, and come to that realization and remain there. Krishna puts it this way, the unreal has no existence. The real never ceases to be. We've memorized that in SRV Loka here a lot. It's just a very nice one-sentence way of saying the unreal has no existence. The real never ceases to be. There's nothing but reality. The truth about both of these has been realized by the seers. That's even more important to us as practitioners. It's nice to hear that first sentence and say, yes, yes. But as a practitioner, we should know that these seers looked into the unreal too. And they looked into it so that they could detach from it, so they could see the changing nature of it and say, I am not that. Not this, it's empty, however you want to say that, and actually take the steps of detaching. You can't just hear the truth and say, I believe it, and then stay caught in Maya. So you have to state the truth, affirm it, confirm it, and then withdraw and live in the truth from then on. And that's a responsibility. So the truth about both of those, the real and the unreal, have been realized by the seers. Coming into being and ceasing to be do not take place in the absolute. It's aparinam. Coming into being and ceasing to be do not take place in reality. That takes place in nature, in the mind. It is unborn, eternal, constant, and timeless. You put Gaudapada, 600 AD, together with Krishna, some many millennia prior to Christ, you've got a winning combination, bookends. So from Rama to Ramakrishna, this wide scope of seers over 5-10 millennia, and that's just a time assignment. Basically, these truths are eternal, that are beyond time, and they just appear in time again according to the needs of the people and the particular projection of our own mind. Avatar is a projection of our own mind. Out of the desire to see God in form, we bring him to earth and coagulate him into a form and meditate upon him. And then he disappears back into the formless, and hopefully we can follow him there. He left some definite footprints, which are all these great teachings along the way. I've been describing that as trail of breadcrumbs, or connecting the dots, however you'd want to say that. So know what you're not, to know who you are. That's going to make your meditations richer, your actions fruitful, your devotion intense, and your study of scriptures rewarding. If you can attain that. What else to say but that Vivekananda avers that non-transformation and all of this happen, and then knowledge happens. Through knowledge, he says, though knowledge, being a compound, cannot be absolute itself, it is nearest approach to it and higher than will or desire. So he says knowledge or intelligence is that first thing out the gate in the creative process. There you see the process. Chittabhasa, pure intelligence reflecting off of reality. Anubhava, the soul's ability to directly perceive it. Paravidya, the sacred wisdom of the non-dual scriptures. And upalabdhi, insight into, or you call it divine remembrance. Those happen from the inside out. But if you were coming from the outside in, you would get insight through the scriptures. You get direct perception called nidijasana or anubhava, and then you would see pure intelligence reflecting off the sun of wisdom. Om. In the beginning was the word. If you can't understand that, go to Gethsemane and meditate on it. Because he wants you to be fishers of men, and you can't really convince fishers of men to get into your net, see, and to get free of the net of Maya unless you can explain to them what they're not, everything they're missing out on, and everything that they're not being able to account for in their life of delusion. So if the divine first becomes knowledge, then second degree it becomes will. Then we have choice. So that's put in terms of abhikya, intuition, and then ahamkara, sense of separate I-ness, then ahamta vritti, self-arrogating thought, and finally aparavidya, secular intelligence, which is different than the sacred intelligence. So mind and will falls into rajas, doesn't it? This pure intelligence is pure sattva. Rajas is restlessness. So it begins to fall into the second compound. First compound, knowledge. Second compound, will. And then below this double line, he says, if there is such a thing as evolution, which of course he does not believe in, it is less and less in the body and more in the mind that it takes place. Man, the highest form, meaning manas, thought, the animal that thinks, and not the animal that senses only. So if there's any evolution going on, really, you could trace it, any sense of reality to it here in your own head, where things are evolving and involving constantly. With each breath, with your 24-hour period of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, with each 12-year cycle, with each lifetime, and over a series of lifetimes. Otherwise, he said, Manas, the man who thinks. So this man isn't thinking very well. His name was Manas, mind. And this mind was constantly having a problem in the lower half of the Maya web. So he had to get knowledge. And he probably did that by making a choice, getting out of the lower way of thinking. Somebody came recently and said, I depend on my dreams. My dreams guide me. I said, well, good if your dreams are informed by intelligence. But remember, there's a whole cross-section of dreams that are the 1,000 imbecilities of the mind. You don't want those to guide you. So gain some higher intelligence, and that will lead you to spirituality. And that spirituality will say one word to you, aparinama. God does not transform. And then you'll have a gauge by which to judge everything. Oh, I'm falling into Maya. I'm believing in that change. I'm believing in that transformation. And then you'll come up to your kids and they'll say, am I growing? And you'll say, no, you're the same as you always were. Perfect. And then watch them grow in that light, like the kids of the Indian rishis did. They produced rishi after rishi after rishi, and they're still doing it by that kind of upbringing, by staying clear of Maya. Beautiful chart there. I like to bring it back every once in a while. There is one more quote at the bottom there. By Gaudapada, our non-dualist, he says, as long as the upadhis are present, that means the sheaths, body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego. As long as those 5 sheaths are present, the embodied soul retains its individuation. It thinks of itself as a separate I, and it has self-irrigating thought that backs that up. It's arrogant. One of my teacher's favorite words for us. Go through the ashram sometime and yell at it. You Americans are arrogant! And the Hindus would all go, and you're weak and worthless. Get some strength like them. So somewhere between that weakness and that arrogance, which is strength and weakness, we have to find a balance and become noble. Like herding cats. And actually trying to give a pill to a cat after that. So he says, but the Paramatman undergoes no change due to these superimpositions. That is, these 5 sheaths that gather around the soul, around the Atman. The Paramatman does not change because of that accretion, that accumulation. It's non-actual. It's just an assumption of form. As the clay pot is not a transformation of the unchanging Akasha, so too the individual soul is not a transformation of the immutable Paramatman, who had these changes projected upon it by ignorant minds. So if you're identifying with the body-mind mechanism and you're thinking yourself, you're superimposing all those things over God, then save me from my friends, as Vivekananda said. God save them all, but save me from them. See, because I don't want to fall into that muddled way of thinking that God can be a form. God is always formless, and it doesn't transform. It doesn't change. It's always been that way. It's always been perfect. It will never not be perfect. So keeping that asana, that mental asana, is the Advaita Vedanta, is the Zen Buddhism. And it results in Satori, Samadhi, Nirvikalpa, Nirvana, and beatific vision, or Fana in Muslimism. You leave that alone and just praise it. Merge with it. We have about 20 minutes left, and I did have a few other things to bring out. And then we will end our last class here and come back in May to reconvene. Now, this idea of the individual soul is as subtle as a hair point divided and subdivided hundreds of times, is very interesting. So we ended last series of class with a brand new chart called the Nadis, the Lokas, and the Transmigration of Souls. So that's a way of explaining. Some of us are familiar with this teaching via this chart already, because we had it at the Seattle retreat and we had it last time I was here. But you can see how Vedanta has a special affinity for and relation with Kundalini yoga, if you know that word. Kundalini is mother power, dynamic mother power herself. Shakti, the goddess in dynamic form, but formless. Can manifest as a form, but is formless. So there's a Upanishad. Upanishad is Vedanta. Upanishad called the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad. So there's one of the great rishis who put a lot of that knowledge down in a form that Vedavyas could capture later and save, in the form of the 108 Upanishads that still exist. That's why 108 is a sacred number in the world, because and why there are 108 beads on your mala. There's so many significances to that number, probably the most profound being that he managed to save 108 of these Upanishads. Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta, must have been maybe many hundreds or even thousands of them lost. Lost means in time, but not lost in essence. So here is my rendering of the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad into a chart that enables us to understand, even on another level or from a different perspective, how the soul transmigrates in that dream life, how it apparently moves from place to place, and how it can arrive at a stationary place and witness it all, and witness actually the movement of other souls in a dream. He's awakened from the dream and now can perceive all the dreaming process, the sankalpic process of everyone. That's eventually what gave rise to a great soul like Lord Brahma, you see, that he was so high in his meditations he could finally was qualified to see the movement of all souls in their dreaming process. And he became not only the supplier of all those things that could fulfill their dreams and wake them up, but also the epitome of the universal process. So he would, there's his name here, Brahma, Granti, and Vishnu, and Rudra, or Shiva. So there's, the Trinity has a sort of line of demarcation in Kundalini Yoga as well. The root chakra, in other words, is very powerful in the terms of creation, but it also contains many poisons like lust, anger, and so forth. So there's a Granti here that's hard. Here's the central channel, right? That's called your Sushumna. You have a physical version of that. See, I teach it the other way. It's not that the spine, the physical spine, is the real spine. That's your physical version of it. And you've got the subtle, the kingdoms of heaven within you is this Sushumna that's connected to hundreds and thousands of nerves. That's why it's as subtle as a hair point, divided and subdivided many times. That's why it's nice to take these quotes from the Prajna Upanishad. In the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each of those are 100 more, and each of those branch into 72,000 others, called nadis. In all of these, the Shakti power flows. So my attempt at seeing all these nerves of a subtle nervous system, a gross nervous system, a causal nervous system, and a subtle nervous system, and finally a transcendent reality, to show this inner map. Kingdoms of heaven are within, if you will. In here, within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness, with its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, in which all universes exist. You see why lotus wasn't just some flower they selected to represent. Actually, Lord Brahma is sitting on a 1,000-petaled lotus, you see, down here. And that's, each petal has hundreds and thousands of worlds in it, in other words, and leading to all those hundreds of thousands of nerves are those 100,000 nadis. Souls can arrive there through that and pass from there through those. So shaped like the calyx of a lotus in which all universes exist. They can't really be more direct about it, about their faith, not just a belief, a mere belief, but their faith in an inner realm. And if you're Christian and you heard Christ say the kingdoms of heaven are within you and so forth, then you should probably start looking into that the way other traditions have laid it out for you. Here, that individual soul is as subtle as a hair point, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. That's Sloka 8, Chapter 5, Svetashvatara Upanishad. So I used that. Also, bathe at the most sacred confluence of holy rivers, found within the precious human body, where the three spiritual nerve channels meet. 1, 2, 3. Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala. or the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, as I call it. You go on a trip along those rivers in discovery. So some very beautiful quotes to, and there's the one I chanted earlier. There in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, abides the Atman. Stationary, but becoming manifold. So it's centered in stillness, non-movement, aparinama, but it has that ability to burgeon via the Shakti power, the dynamic power. Meditate on that self as Om, and Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. There's something to teach your children, and we have. They all have memorized that sloka, all the SRV children. And that actually was a password into their tent. At the summer retreat, I went down there. Can I come in? What's the password? Svastivaha paraya tamasa parastat. Give that to me in English. So then I could get in their tent and see what they're up to. And they're up to all sorts of beautiful little Lord Brahma things, creations. When they made this lamp once that covered it with sort of transparent paper and put a sun on it and earth and various things, and it revolved around this light. So the light is Brahman, and then this revolving lampshade has all these various things of nature on it. So they're showing how the one light remains the same and the many change and pass in cycles. And beautiful things they've been doing that will stick with them their whole life. If you are there in this giving up of form level, where the Videha Muktas, that means free from all bodies, the Nityasiddhas, the eternally perfect, and the Mahatmas, the great souls, if they wanted to take on form, they would have to come down through the Rudra Granthi, through the throat chakra, third eye chakra, and penetrate down into these realms. That's what I said, Sri Ramakrishna came down only as far as the heart. The avatar, you can see the double triangle, right? The triangle going up over the triangle going down means the soul ascending and the avatar coming down. So, Star of David kind of symbology, but particular symbology in Hinduism or in Kundalini Yoga in this case. On the side there I put all the worlds: Brahmaloka, Taparloka, Janaloka, Maharloka, Swarloka, Bhuvarloka, Burloka. If you took that the opposite way, you would have Bur, Bhuva, Swaha, the great Gayatri mantra. So peace to the three worlds. And then beyond that, you would have the realm of the Lord Brahma, you'd have, or Indra, and you'd have the world of the Rishis, the seven original seers, and Brahmaloka itself, Lord Brahma, with all the nerve endings, you see, with all the subtle nerve endings going back and forth to the different chakras that souls pass in and out of these worlds, and also pass into states of ecstatic sporting in consciousness. Here is sporting in consciousness, but here is wondering and ignorance. See, so if we don't get above that ancestor level, where the child is born, where food is digested, and so forth, then, you transmigrate in these three lower worlds, wandering amongst the three paths, as we had yesterday in that chart. Tiryan Marga, remember, and Pitri Yana and Devayana, the three paths, they wander there. Path of lower births, path of the fathers, and path of the gods. Easy to wander back and forth. Path of the sun, path of the moon. And the various beings, humans, animals, insects, plant life, and then ancestors here, and celestials here. In the three, this would be earth, lower heaven, and higher heaven. Then you transcend heaven and you get to the realm of the seers. And you could also say then gross body, the subtle body, causal body, and beyond all bodies. Or waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and turiya. However you put it, there are different things on this chart that when I put out the chart book with all of them in that, you can pore over it. You want with a magnifying glass if you want. But actually, I pretty much covered that in a sweep. I don't see, there are other little details there. There's the Gyanakasha, Lake of Wisdom, as opposed to the occult light, the ocean of occult light. Very different levels. Ocean of wisdom, ocean of power, by which people gain occult powers. So there are little details like that that you can also look at to make some sense out of some of this abstract and esoteric teachings in the scriptures. Hard to kind of, in this day and age, thousands of years later, to extract it. But that's what Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda came for. One of the things they came for. Then also we want to look at, in accordance with that, as the two were created together and they go together, finally look at this curtain of nescience once more. Because that's what's... should have had them on two different chart stands, but that's what the various Granthis, Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, and finally Rudra Granthi are consisting of. They're like curtains of nescience or membranes that keep souls from ascending, inward ascension to higher levels. So they'll come back again, reborn with the humans, and then take up ancestor birth in heaven, come back again with the humans. I do not care for a post-mortem emancipation, my teacher said. And Vedantists don't care for heaven. We're not seeking heaven. So it began to make us wonder, what are we seeking? And really, we're seeking that which cannot be sought, which we already are. So in that way, you have to look into ideas like resist not evil, because all of us is a kind of evil, but evil is insentient. Like darkness in a cave, it doesn't have a sentient presence. Bring a light in and it's gone. It might have been there for 1,000 years, but it takes a few seconds to get rid of it. So you have to look at darkness and impediments and things like that. They can be overcome immediately by bringing the light of the higher teachings up. So you could go from a different direction, ask, what is it that's keeping me from ascending? From penetrating those granthis, means knot. Those subtle membranes are knots. And the subtlest teachings, like according to Lord Shiva there, a very cryptic reference to find out about an esoteric teaching like this. He's saying that the curtain of nescience, I have to give me a moment here. The curtain of nescience, he says, consists of fear, doubt, and ignorance, and is maintained and thickened due to the mind's brooding on effects of these three primal causes. So you find out that it's really not such a how do they say, complicated process. Basically, we've made it more complicated and exacerbated the whole situation by believing in impossible things. But there's a representation of fear in the mind, representation of doubt in the mind, and a representation of ignorance in the mind. And Lord Shiva speaking into the curtain of nescience to inform people of the unreality of it. But more than that, he's actually defining what is it? What are the phantoms in the mind that bother us? Doubt of fear of what? Of not existing. So brooding on death actually thickens the idea that death is real. When I've received a command from the Mother of the Universe that death should die. See? Or fear of formlessness. That keeps us from knowing our true nature. We fall into sleep and we don't really inspect our deep sleep state. We just take it for granted, even though we get great refection from deep sleep. If you don't go into deep sleep, you turn into a nervous wreck after a few days. So that's the one time when we can really get some spiritual substance from a formless state in our daily life. Fear of suffering, instead of transcending it or facing it off. Father of Yoga was a good teacher for that. You should face off with those sufferings. And as I quoted earlier, Sri Krishna says, let that disconnect of the body with its pain be known as yoga. You can transcend suffering. You shouldn't just forbear it. That's the beginning, but you can actually transcend it. Like Sri Ramakrishna's cancer in the throat. Doesn't that pain you? They asked him. He said, only when I talk to you. He says, as soon as you go away, my mind will go back up, you see, to the crown chakra, where Mother Kali is, and I won't feel this. So transcending the body's pain is an option, a very good option. Would have to be practiced by forbearance and then attained. It's like you know, if you have a headache and start reading, you forget about your headache. So it's still there, but your mind actually has the ability to take its attention off of that. So how you put your conscious attention in places is dharana, is concentration. Fear of other entities is there. If you go over to doubt about what? About divine reality. You haven't come to the conclusion that brooks the question, does God exist or does God not exist? And goes beyond the question and just states God is existence. End of story. God exists or God is existence. Then you don't have any more doubt about divine reality. And all that's left for you to do is seek it, find it, and merge with it. And Vedanta says, then bring it into your life and live in it. Doubt about formlessness. Formlessness appears, I think, in every one of these Triputi. Doubt about your formless nature, that has to be proved to you. That you are a formless entity and therefore not subject to suffering, death, and those kinds of things. That you are pure conscious awareness. Doubt about the purpose of life, doubt about the presence of Maya, doubt about the emptiness of form are all good teachers and teachings. Emptiness of form, the way the Buddhists would teach you, that all of this is insubstantial. And but it's not empty of essence, that it's not empty of the witness looking on the form, but the form itself cannot fulfill you. Gets stolen, gets broken, it decays, you get bored with it, whatever. The form is not capable of fulfilling you. And it's not capable of being known, is it? Because it's actually just particles changing at a billionth of a second. So you can't even know a form. It's an illusion. If you want to get the hard-edged teaching, then you'll have to get that. But if you want to get the fuller teaching, then you're going to have to contemplate it and know its nature. And that would get rid of the doubt about divine reality, wouldn't it? And you'd know the unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. And you'd know the nature of both, the unreal, Maya, and the real Brahman. And you wouldn't be confused anymore. Your doubt would go away. What about ignorance in the final minutes here? Ignorance of your true self. Ignorance of the non-dual truth. Ignorance of a series of births. Ignorance of spiritual discrimination. That is, how to apply it. Ignorance of dharmic or divine life. And ignorance of the revealed scriptures and the guru. All of those things, real big holes in your life. And if you fill them in, ignorance is gone. Gone. Utterly gone. The guru will tell you, who can veil the truth? It's like trying to keep a fire tied in a cotton cloth. It's not possible. Ignorance will go away like darkness in a cave when the explorer brings a torch in. Now, these are good facets to know and meditate on and meditate away, right? But the real teaching he's saying here is that it all is increased by brooding. Those thick levels of demarcation, the Brahma Granthi, the Vishnu Granthi, and the Rudra Granthi are actually thickened by brooding on these things, whereas you should be meditating them away. If you meditate them away, those granthis or membranes become very thin, and you see the light. Sister Nivedita was telling us in a story once, she said, one of the direct disciples came to Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna said, "How did you sleep?" or something like that. And he said, "Oh, as usual, I saw the light." And Ramakrishna said, "Oh, really? Do you see the light every time you go into deep sleep?" And the man said, "Doesn't everyone?" It's like a child. He thought that everyone saw the light in deep sleep. Come to find out, a lot of people see a lot of garbage in their mind in sleep, and have nightmares and suffer, or just go blank. Whatever the case may be, the ignorance takes over. Ignorance would be blank, and fear would be nightmares, and doubt would be a lot of garbage in your mind. So if you wake up and you start brooding on those things, you thicken that curtain of nescience. This whole kind of dark area is like this one cloud of nescience that's covering our mind. But if you meditate, contemplate, and follow these paths, then that curtain of nescience thins. It's not something that you can actually see happen. It's like karma. You suddenly wake up and you're free of something, and it doesn't plague you anymore. So something you did, whether it was a practice or something in a past lifetime even that came to fructification, a practice that you did before, a dharma drop in the bucket, as Buddha said, all of a sudden fructified and brought you this boon, and all of a sudden you're free of a particular thing that plagued you all your life. It's like the curtain of nescience just thinned out there, and you could see the light. So we've had 3 hours of this heavy, esoteric, philosophic, cosmological, and spiritual discourse. Thank you for forbearing that. I hope it wasn't suffering for you. Or if it is, it's a good kind of suffering that will awaken us. Ignoble whips of pain, they say, that drive man toward the infinite, whose beauty alone should beckon him. Yes. So basically that will continue on in SRV tradition in May when I come back for Buddha Purnima, and we'll have that retreat up the gorge on Buddhistic teachings in accord with Sankhya and Vedanta. And you're all welcome to that, and your friends are welcome. And we will now end with a chant and make a few announcements after we say aloha to the live streaming audience. Om Padram, Om Padram, Karnibhihi Shriyam Devaha, Badram Pasyema Akshajir Jatraha, Stirai Rangaish Tushtuvam Sastamavir, Vyashema Devahitam Yadayo. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Before we depart from the live streaming audience, make a quick announcement that says next week there will be no live streaming classes. So you'll catch us in Hawaii the weekend after next on our regular schedule. So thank you for being with us, all you invisible souls, in your subtle bodies around the world. And we say namaste.